Water stewardship is our next panel coming up. So let's dive into a more solution-oriented discussion. Our next discussion topic is water stewardship, as I said, industry collaborations on the rise. Let me introduce the panel. So next to me we have the perspective of an NGO. He's leading WWF's global efforts on water stewardship, Alexis Morgan. Thank you for coming. Yes. You have to move too, you know, get some air. And then we have an entrepreneur, event producer, and advisor, a conscious fashion campaign, Carrie Bannigan. And a brand which offers a technically innovative color system. This is the CEO of We Are Spindye, I like your motto, putting water out of business, Micke Magnusson. And we have a representative of an alliance for sustainable production called Sustainable Apparel Coalition, SAC. Here's the business development manager at SAC, Lauren Zahringer. So in our previous panel, we talked about the risks concerning the usage of water in production and fashion and some suggestions. And now I would like to focus on the water issue. I would just hand over to anyone who wants to answer first. What do you think are the most promising approaches towards a more sustainable water management? Alexis, do you want to start?
So I think, you know, it's worth, there's a lot of doom and gloom when it comes to water and environmental issues as a whole, and so I think it's also worth really celebrating some of the successes and momentum that we do have. I think it's really exciting in the apparel and textile sector as a whole that there has been so much sectoral recognition of water as an issue, and that there has been a lot of collaboration. I think there's been incredible strides made because of groups like Sustainable Apparel Coalition, and unifying reporting and language. Those sorts of things are really, really critical at the outset. Certainly for us as WWF in this space, I think one of the most exciting shifts that we've seen is not only a real embracing of water stewardship as a concept, and Philip sort of spoke a little bit of that, but it's this piece around collaboration that excites me the most. We do a lot of work on the ground in places like Pakistan and India where we're working with these SMEs, and it is a challenge for the brands to work with those. So I think what's exciting is once we are working collectively as a group in that, not only can you begin to do shared training across a number of players, but you can also bring joint financing. And we shouldn't kid ourselves that that's not a necessary part of this whole thing, because oftentimes when you get into the basics of it, they're still using very, very rudimentary technologies, and there's huge opportunities to get in there and improve the technology being applied on the ground. But to do that, you need scale, you need finance, and those sorts of things. So I think that collaboration on the ground with SMEs and by working together, you have that power. For me, that's one of the most exciting developments that we're seeing.
Okay, we'll hand it over just to...
I'm actually going to give it to you.
You want to say some, Ed? Yeah. Okay.
I can just continue on that path, and that is to say that, you know, from the Sustainable Apparel Coalition's perspective, our main goal is to, yes, be able to convene NGOs. Obviously, we're a multi-stakeholder initiative, so NGOs, brands, retailers, manufacturers, and yes, by coming together and working together, we can begin to tackle an issue such as water stewardship, which is a complex one, and I don't think that brands can do it on their own, factories can do it on their own, but that it does require to have a really collaborative effort, and only through these collaborative efforts and also taking into account local conditions and local initiatives can you really begin to actually have this trickle-down effect where real change can be made with the sharing of information, the sharing of resources. So I would just like to agree that I think collaboration and an active collaboration and interest in making change, not just for the needs of the factories, but also brands also taking initiative to really help within the positive change of their supply chain is something that we're seeing happening more and more, and will be what takes us to really driving forward things such as closed loop recycling, or making those technology or infrastructure changes in the future.
Okay, Micke, maybe we can start with your company. We are Spindye. You're offering a technology solution to put water out of business. And what way do you think water will already become dispensable for the processes used to produce fashion and apparel within the next years?
Well, I can basically not speak so much about anything else but man-made, so synthetics. And there's a lot of developments in the synthetic field that is so much more efficient in terms of basically all raw material management, that I'm very positive. I'm not only speaking about polyester, but polyamide and everything. I can't really speak about natural fibers because I don't know anything about it. So we're just one out of many. So I think if the question is what is needed, I think collaboration is one. Awareness is obviously key. But what I'm missing in the discussion a lot of times are the retailers.
Okay, yeah. Carrie, you're nodding your head. Would you like to add something?
Yeah, just following up on that, and I think the key, what you just said there, is the retailers. The awareness, the relationships, and the collaboration. But the retailers are so key to pushing all the activations, engagements, everything that everyone is leading up to do. The reality is it now needs to push the needle towards conscious consumerism. And all the efforts, the amazing organizations, companies, and even tools that are now coming out, without the retailers, what does that then do with spending? How does that keep the industry itself sustainable and help businesses continue on? Where will all these efforts continue, and what will happen? The retailers are key because business won't continue on without them.
Yeah, Alexis, I think we should dive more into water stewardship and what it exactly is, because we've talked about it briefly before, but please explain a little bit more into detail.
Sure. So, I mean, there are formal definitions of water stewardship, and really the essence of the formal definition, which is around water being socially equitable, environmentally sustainable, and economically beneficial for people in basins. But the critical part that underpins it is activity that is not only within the facility, but activity within the basin. It really is rooted in the context of the basin. And stewardship should deliver ultimately on the elements that really tie through to the Sustainable Development Goals on water. So issues around access to water and sanitation, issues around water management and quantity, the issues of quality, the issues of water governance and ecosystems. All of those really are what are at the heart of it. The real shift, I would say, from more traditional water management to water stewardship is moving outside of your factory fence lines or your direct operations. It's getting into this notion of influence and working collaboratively with others within the basin. And so what we have seen in that is, a push as time has gone on towards activities that go from just being, efficiency targets to thinking about what does that basin need? What is the specifics? What is the boundary in that system? Not just generally, 10% less water use or 10% improvement, but specifically there, how much water is available versus in another place, and how much can this system handle? So that notion of context is becoming really, really critical, and that it underpins this notion of stewardship and how you work with others to actually achieve the, environmental pieces that you need, the social pieces that you need, and the economics that you need.
So the influence on brands, for example, how they manage their supply chains. Would you say you're having an influence there, or? Yeah,
I mean that's definitely a part of it. So a huge part of it is the supply chain. But I would also pick up on the point that Carrie made a moment ago, which is we're also seeing a general push amongst a lot of brands and retailers around this idea of purpose. you know, that companies, and to attract talent, to retain talent, those sorts of things, and to engage consumers in conscious consumerism, you really need to have more than just a product. It's a concept behind it. And so we see brands beginning to not only educate and engage consumers, but also act as lobbyists themselves, really trying to be progressive in policy engagement and say, this is a good idea. We want stronger regulation, and we're in support of that. So they become advocates themselves, and the line between NGO and company these days becomes increasingly thin on some of those things, which is great. You know?
Yeah, we had Amira. She's an activist and she sells sweaters.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Lauren, I would like to talk to you. The SAC members represent a great part of the overall global apparel industry. And what is the talk, and what are the solutions, and then what are the actions? So what is the talk, and what are the actions of your members?
Yes, well, that's a really good question. To start with, let me just give a little bit of a background for some people that might not know exactly about the SAC and the Higg Index. So basically the SAC is a multi-stakeholder initiative, and we've created the Higg Index. So along with all of our members, so we convene nonprofits, as I said earlier, NGOs, brands, retailers, manufacturers. And so in terms of the talk, I'm going to kind of take this in two different directions. Obviously, when we're talking here about water stewardship, and also that also has to then include not just water use, but also waste and chemicals. This has become a hot topic and has been for a long time. And in terms of the talk, one of the new things that the SAC has recently involved themselves in as the co-founder is the Apparel Impact Institute. So this is a new project of ours that is working specifically with the Clean by Design program to begin addressing water stewardship at the level of mills and mill improvements. So that's basically the most recent news from the SAC. And then in terms of what our members are doing, it's basically twofold. Obviously, all SAC members are required to complete and post the Higg Index, and depending on what type of member, it's a different tool. So for our members, starting with brands and retailers, they have to complete the brand and retail module, which measures water use and efficiency at a brand and retail level, and then they report on this. So that really starts with saying, whether you're a manufacturer, a brand and retailer, where am I, what am I using, and what's the impact? But then moving more into the supply chain, we have the Higg FEM, and this is the facility environmental module. And that module helps to inform brands, retailers, and manufacturers of the environmental impacts of their operations. And this is really where I think a lot of the work that our members are doing around water stewardship comes into place, because two aspects of the FEM are both water use and wastewater. And to take it even a step further, the way that the FEM works in order to scale change and really make a tangible impact is it's broken down into levels. So if you look at the SAC and you look at our brands, you can start to take away the fact that most of those brands have been working with their factories, starting with level 1, which requires them to, pulling into WWF, use tools such as the World Resources Aqueduct and the WWF water analysis tool to understand, are you in a high-risk area? Are you in an area where access to water to begin with is a problem? And that way we can kind of not only fast-track, but highlight those factories that are in a high-risk area, but then still all factories that complete the FEM start with first just setting up a water management program. You'd be surprised that oftentimes this very basic foundation is lacking, and so we provide the support, and our brands and retailer members do throughout their supply chain to get them first at that level, and then from there they start to set a baseline and start to set targets, and only once they get to level 3 are we talking about leadership and best practices. So really, I would say the overall statement or position from the SAC is that addressing water use and water stewardship in the supply chain really starts with measurement, really starts with understanding what water you use, how you use water, and what risk you're at, so that you can then start to make tangible plans and improvements to greatly improve your environmental performance by reducing water or reducing the waste of water, as it is obviously a limited resource.
Yeah. Okay. I would like to include you too.
Yeah, no. So, I mean, as a member, I think this is great, and we've been participating for this for a while. So, what we are trying to do to take it to the next level is to actually put how much water has actually been used on the label of the product. So we sit on this data, we produce a fabric, we put it in the hands of the brands and say, pretty please with sugar on top, put it on the label, show the consumer. Because in fact, the retailers are following the consumers. Huh? So if we don't manage to get the consumers on board, it's going to take another 10 years, another 10 conferences about water stewardship before anything happens. Huh? So I think we just need to push it to the last frontier, which is the consumer.
The awareness of what's happening. So.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, it's easy for us because we trace our stuff. We know exactly where it's done, where it's not, how much water is being done. We use the ISO standards to track all this information. And we started the company based on this. So for us, it's not hard but then again, it's not cotton, huh? It's polyester, it's recycled polyester. So it's a slightly simpler supply chain. But we have all the data. We have all the information. And we just say, put it on a label, show the consumer.
And mass production?
Sorry?
Mass production?
Mass production.
Mass production.
Mass production. So we have a couple of millions of items already out there.
Yeah, okay. So one side is the awareness of the customer, but also the UN has announced the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, to provide a global framework. So lots of things are happening, and also the UN is heading somewhere. Carrie, I would like to talk about that with you, particularly the UN Fashion Industry Charter for Climate Action that was signed by many stakeholders from the fashion industry and presented just a few weeks ago by Stella McCartney. So where is the UN heading?
It's very interesting because I think people keep asking this now, especially because it's making some headway and really looking to collaborate with the fashion industry. It's finally opening the doors, and it wants to hear from people on the ground that are making really innovative moves and are doing incredible things, from textiles to fabrics to organizations, and then the designers and retailers themselves. You're seeing several things that are going to happen. You had recently the UN Fashion Charter. In March, you're going to see the launch of the UN Alliance of Sustainable Fashion taking place in Nairobi. And now, more recently, we also have the Conscious Fashion campaign. And all of these things need to tackle specific areas. There is so much within the fashion industry. One, yes, people talk about the pollution and the damage that the industry is doing, but the reality as well, the fashion industry has so much power and so much influence to do good and to make matters change very quickly. And so I think 2019 is going to see a lot of ambassadors from the UN, as well as the governments and the leaders that they work with, come forward globally and ask as a call to action. And you mentioned about the Sustainable Development Goals. For people that are not familiar with them, they were launched in 2015 at the United Nations General Assembly, and they are a framework of 17 global goals as a very urgent call to action for some of the world's pressing issues that we're facing today that do range from climate to the workplace to education. In the 17, and it's amazing. There's probably, we could add on a lot more too, but 17 is already a lot for people to embrace. And with that, you're seeing different sectors come forward. But what's amazing is the fashion industry is truly stepping up and just really embracing the change that they can do. And what's always being known as a rather competitive field, especially on the design side of things, it's now the key, as everyone has mentioned here, is collaboration and the awareness and how people are creating innovative technologies and they want to share it amongst each other, or tools, and the standards that are coming out by the industry as well are fantastic. And I think it's a really interesting time to work in the industry and what we're seeing happen. And between the power of tech and what you're saying, like some of the very archaic things that are happening, and if technology could be embraced more by the industry, things could happen much quicker.
Yeah, what are the most important SDGs for fashion and apparel and the textile industries? What would you say?
I actually think all 17 can be embraced. depending on what you're doing.
Okay.
But obviously, I do then think it filters out 12 being responsible consumption. There's also moves to about sustainable cities and communities. There's also about decent work growth and environments. Then there's gender equality. I mean, it literally, the fashion industry hits all 17. But again, depending what you're doing, whether you're the brand, the manufacturer, to the fabric, to the retailer, to even the media, 1 to 3 of them is probably what suits you. And if everybody could take those steps, and again, collaborate and make small steps in what they could do, phenomenal change could happen globally.
Yeah, right. So, and Alexis, in what way do you think the like other brands, retailers, and suppliers will sign up for this charter to take the necessary actions?
I mean, my sense is that it's not a super hard sell. We're seeing a lot of momentum. We see that with a lot of the partners that we already work with, whether that's H&M, Levi's, many of the companies that we've heard about today. So I think there is an appetite there. I mean, I think the challenge is not so much the brands, but it's the mobilization of their supply chains that is where the real challenge comes. Because, even if you're a major global brand and you've got huge supply chains, you may still only occupy a fraction of the percentage of a tier 2 supplier. And so mobilizing that tier 2 supplier becomes where the challenge lies, because you can't just say, do it. They're their own independent business, and they can choose to move or not move. So it's about influence and about really creating opportunities for those other companies in supply chains to thrive. And that's where I do think there are opportunities for technology to come in, because we're seeing everything from just new forms of remote sensing and satellite imagery that can help farmers get much more efficient about how they apply water, when they apply it, how much they apply to which part of their field. Those kinds of technologies, I think, are really, really neat. And we're certainly collaborating with, taking in information from the Higg Index now and being able to customize a set of recommendations for thousands. I mean, we could do as many as we wanted to. As long as we've got the Higg Index information and we know where that facility is located, we can say, based on your location and what you're telling us from the Higg Index, here are the recommendations we would provide to you. And they don't have the capacity to sit down and develop a whole water stewardship plan, but we can kind of leapfrog using a mixture of collaboration and technology now in tools like the water risk filter that we run. So for me, that's what's exciting. And if you can give them the opportunities to thrive and grow, they then share it locally with their competitors, their friends. We've seen great stories of this in places like China, where there's been just really exciting things where local entrepreneurs have just grabbed something and run with it. So I think the brands will definitely engage in this. My hope is that through that we can mobilize the SMEs, which is where the real challenge lies, I think.
Yeah. So Lauren, you were nodding your head saying you want to add something to that. Is that something you're...
Yeah, well, no, I guess I was just, well, first of all, in agreement that, as we are able to get more information together and share information, you're also able to mobilize change. And it was just making me, think about how we also have howtohig.org, which does start to allow best practices in all areas of environmental sustainability be shared kind of on a, public platform, and that there are many times that small SMEs will come to us and have read about a way to make an improvement either in their brand level or want to get more information on factory level, and having this open source information becomes really useful. That's basically what I was nodding my head to. But I guess one other thing that I was thinking to add was that when it comes to also thinking about driving change, also one interesting point about the Higg Index that I think really helps our members to make improvements is that not only are we gathering data and obviously verifying that data, but then we're also allowing companies to benchmark themselves, anonymously, of course, but starting to see where let's just stay on the supply chain aspects, so starting to see how your different factories perform in different areas such as water or wastewater or chemicals, and being able to get that bigger perspective of, factory A, B, and C, as opposed to all of the factories that have completed the Higg Index, data is really becoming a big part of where we can drive change, and also understanding, let's say I'm a brand, and I see that 2 of my factories, and they happen to be in a similar area, our score are in comparison to everybody else doing less well, then maybe I know that there's a local solution there. So I do think that, yes, converging data, obviously technology is allowing us to make innovations in all areas and all fields of life. And I would say that fashion and sustainability is a really big one.
Yeah, and Micke, we're talking about the companies now, and they have to look at their supply chains. But you said earlier, you want the awareness, the customers to. How can we raise the awareness? What do you think?
We have to be a little bit less cynical. I think that we have to realize that this world is dictated by the brands and the retailers. Yeah. The supply chains will follow if there is a business incentive, if there's motivation and reasons to do. So, I mean, I think the targets, there's a gap between the target setting and the charter signage and the actual actions going on in the brands and the retailers. And I would love to see a lot of more flexibility in process. You speak about, we're going to do this, but when we speak to the brands and we ask them, okay, so you're going to save 50 million tons of this and that, so how are you going to do this? And we speak to a lot of production guys and they say, you know what, I have no idea. So I think there is a gap between the target setting and the charters and the so-called political approach to the water stewardship versus the concrete action plans. And I think that this is where the supply chain guys and disruptive ideas can play a part. There is a need of good best practices, but there is also a need of flexibility in process. Because there will be no new things coming out if you're still asking for a horse and carriage. If the process doesn't change, if the people doesn't change, if you don't allow people to fail forward, then very few things is going to change. So if the production guys are still forced to say, okay, everything is great, you need to become more sustainable, but we also need you to be 4% less expensive, then there's going to be a slow process.
Yeah.
That's speaking from supply chain.
And to raise awareness for the customer, Carrie, let's talk about the conscious fashion campaign a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I just wanted to add on from that is so true, just quickly, and both of you, without data, but there's been so much talk for so long now, and it's great that there's ideas and things, but the data is showing the substance and the results. And I think it's great that we do need more of a call to action there regarding let's trial and error, but share the results as an industry. So people can see we tried this, now do this, and then move. You then look to see, this didn't work, but let's not include them in something. Let's not remove. Let's continue to grow from that. And then that leads into, we were asking, the point of the conscious fashion campaign is to raise awareness to drive conscious consumerism, but because there is a huge gap between those making the product to those wanting to buy it. And we think there's a big ownership and responsibility now from the retailers and the media and those of influence. And that's on our side of knowledge, where we look to see the retailers have so much power, whether it's in their windows, and we think the labeling is a big thing that needs to come now. I mean, just imagine being able to go and shop and you can just look at the label, even if the retail staff or the merchandisers could be a bit more educated. You go into a shop to look for something, and if you do ask about, is this a sustainable brand, the staff aren't there yet if you're in a main store and not a specific sustainable store. And so that education has to also happen internally as a business. And so with us here working with the trade shows, we want to educate the buyers about more what they can do with their spending power and to fill the stores with good products, and it trickles down for everybody's efforts. But then we also want to work with retailers directly in their stores. Can you be doing more to highlight the good product that's here and what people are doing? Can there be more information from labeling? Not you don't need to give things with the product. These printouts are pointless. No one has time. People are talking about QR codes, but really when you're shopping, your experience is not to get your phone out and stop. That's wonderful, but can it be immediately on the label? And I know there's lots of standards coming out, and there's talks of certifications, and so we're at that point now to go from the ideal target setting and the talking to doing and experimenting and see what can work to drive the consumers to engage more and spend better.
Yeah, well, I have an 11-year-old daughter, and she's just, she's always wanted to dress what she wants, but now she wants to spend her pocket money. And of course, she wants the cheap stuff because she doesn't want to spend much. And I'm trying, so how do we raise awareness with the millennials? We've just heard it's difficult, but I think, transparency, we have to talk about that. So what's going on? So maybe we can just say, well, what could happen, what needs to happen now, and then after we can talk what needs to happen then next. So like the first step, Alexis, what is the first action?
I mean, as Philip mentioned earlier, our general sort of theory of change is raising awareness and then going from awareness to kind of internal action and then ultimately to collective action and policy engagement. I think that's the general trajectory that we've seen, and that's sort of the broad answer I would give. Mm-hmm. What I think for the work that I'm most engaged in these days and what perhaps excites me the most is not just intra-sectoral collaboration, which we're seeing a lot within the fashion sector, but it's inter-sectoral collaboration, because the fashion industry doesn't, operate in isolation in these places. It's one of many sectors, and there's opportunities. This notion of kind of the circular economy isn't just about product going around. It's about all the other materials that are flowing through the system. So that whether that's a waste product, perhaps somebody else can use that excess dye that's in that system and take it out. So it can be an
close the loop.
Exactly, and close those loops. So there's opportunities when we look between sectors. And what we're starting to do as WWF in this space is create these bankable water solutions where we look across multiple players within a basin and try to identify projects that are profitable, that are bankable, and that allows us to bring the really amazing tech innovations that we're seeing in the West and sometimes in southern countries as well, and translate them and bundle them together into something that actually people are willing to finance at 200 million rather than a $2 million project, which a lot of people don't want to touch. So by bundling a whole bunch of different projects ranging from green infrastructure to really cool new, technology to do dyeing and those sorts of things, we can actually aggregate that and create something that people will invest in, and that can really scale up change on the ground, which I agree, we need to get the change on the ground first and foremost. So for me, that's where we're starting in a lot of this. I mean, we continue to engage the brands, but I think it's on the ground change that we really need more than anything.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we can maybe take it over the question, so everybody can add. Yeah, you can, if you want to say what needs to happen now and what needs to happen next, so we can, because we're kind of touching the final minutes. We're a little late. We started later, so.
Just following on from what I was saying earlier, I think the engagement in the education is what's happening more now, but I think we also need to let people innovate and disrupt, but trial and error and fail and then keep going forward. And we need to celebrate and embrace what people are brave enough to step out and do with their resources within their business or their community, and learn from it and then continue on together from that. And I think that's what needs to happen now. There's been a lot of talkings and meetings and signings, and now it's like, let's everyone come together and test and trial what can happen and make the best of that and continue on, but rapidly and together.
Education is the key.
Yeah. I mean, appetite for self-disruptiveness is kind of a strategic idea, as a brand. I also think I feel a little bit when we speak a lot about this in different kinds of the world. So I think we should be very aware that our anxiety to try to be perfect can't stop significant improvement. There are many discussions about should you let this, or should we just go for try to find the perfect solution. I'm 43. I try to be perfect my entire life. I'm far from there. Huh? So I don't think there is a perfect solution, but I do know that there are disruptive initiatives with significant impact. So there is no reason for saying, okay, maybe, so you can always find something that is wrong with any solution, but if it gives you a significant impact, why not go for it? I think that is a kind of a showstopper in many of these cases, because there's a lot of new things happening. We're trying to find the perfect solution for cotton. We're trying to find the perfect solution for polyester or polyamide and all these things and cellulosics. There won't be one. There's an evolution going on. Don't expect the Holy Grail to just show up around the corner. That's how I see it. Yeah.
So there could be another one, keep coming together, keep talking to each other, and then ideas can pop up.
The technical development is so fast that it's basically impossible to just even keep track of it.
Can you hold the microphone a little bit?
The technical development is going so fast that it's very hard to keep track of it. So there's going to pop up new things all the time. And as a brand with power, and especially as a retailer with power, how much do you set aside to disrupt your normal way of doing things? And this is always a question that how much do you set aside to do this? How much money do you put behind your targets? And how much do you allow your people to actually screw up?
Yeah.
No?
Okay, so then what could be the next step right now and then later on? So,
absolutely. So I guess for right now, everything we do right now should be building up to what I see as, or what the SAC sees as the next step. And really right now, I think it needs to be, and definitely starting with brands and retailers, and also supply chain measurement. Where are you? What are you doing? What are you using? Not only just in regards, to water, waste, chemicals, but also in terms of energies, materials, packaging, transportation, on all factors. Yes, social, but right now I'm speaking towards environmental. And so I think first we need to get a very clear idea, where are we? What are you using? Verify that information so your data is good. Start making plans for improvements and putting those into action, but all with the ultimate goal of transparency. I think it is transparency that will create a real driver towards change and will speed up the desire to actualize new technology, to really put things into place. But you don't want to become transparent until you know where you are. So I think that what really needs to, and I think that these things are kind of happening simultaneously, but it is well known that the SAC has a very ambitious goal for transparency come 2020 regarding the Higg Index. And so this is basically all the work we've been doing up until now. It's all driving towards transparency because, as you aptly said, consumers are the main, I guess, component that makes the wheel go round. Without people buying, there's no reason to make things. And when we can get a very robust information-wise, but also consumer-facing, so making it somewhat cool, interesting, and easily digestible platforms or in-store opportunities for transparency, I think that this is where the future is going. And I think that this is really going to be sparking the fire to move forward in getting your house in order, so to say, and really putting in some tangible plans for improvement. Thank you.
Good. So I think we cannot add anything more than we have a great future ahead. We have great technologies and people coming together, collaborating. So we've talked about some promising approaches towards more sustainable water management. And thank you for your input, and thank you for your attention. See you in about 45 minutes.